What's it like to live in a world full of sycophants and feminists? My fiancé's sycophant made a special trip to New York to find me. As soon as he walked in, he knelt in front of me, crying his heart out. Not only did he scold me for not learning from him how to flatter my girlfriend properly, but he also wanted to teach me how to be a qualified sycophant. However, I was not buying it. Not only did I humiliate his goddess in front of him, but I also made him take me and his goddess on a date. Back in my hometown, my little angel fiancée caused a scene again. When her childhood sycophant decided to leave by plane, she cried and knelt in the departure hall, begging him not to go. The whole incident was live-streamed and became a hot topic. The headline read, "When the sycophant stops fawning, the goddess regrets and cries." Fortunately, the airport was small, and it was late at night, so the Liu family managed to suppress the budding public opinion. Unfortunately, she was late, and the sycophant had already flown to New York. I was initially reluctant to get involved since how she handles her sycophants is her business, but an Asian man kneeling in front of me crying bitterly drew quite a bit of attention. I stood at the top of the stairs, frowning and looking him up and down. I asked, "What's your name, tragic?" The man was stunned for a moment and replied stiffly, "Ethan." I vaguely remembered this sycophant who had been flattering Victoria for the longest time, but it didn't mean he was worth remembering. Over the years, Victoria, dissatisfied with our engagement, had attracted countless sycophants and flirted with many men. Ethan was the one who flattered her the longest, making it his main occupation. Every day he would wake up at 3 in the morning to make breakfast and have a delivery guy bring it to her. After work, he would drive nearly 2 hours across the city just to pick her up from work and present her with a bouquet of roses for a chance to have dinner with her. Sometimes, when Victoria wanted to go on a date with me, he would drive us around and even graciously offer to drop us off at a hotel after dinner. Eventually, he even handed over his salary card to Victoria, letting her buy herself gifts at will. Victoria told me that this was the standard of a good man. I understood well that she mentioned these things to make me jealous, to get me to learn from Ethan. However, not only was I not jealous, but I also didn't care at all. After all, if we each minded our own business, everything would be fine. But it was the first time I had seen such a shameless and self-respectless sycophant come to the main person to sell his misery. I gradually showed impatience. "What do you want from me?" I asked. True to his marketing skills, he burst into tears almost immediately. He choked, "Mr. Sincere, Victoria loves me. Please let her go and stop pestering her." I raised an eyebrow. "Pestering?" I chuckled in disbelief, looked down at him, and said, "Mr. Ethan, is that something a sycophant should say? Can a woman truly love a sycophant? You're overestimating yourself. And what do you mean by me pestering her? Get it straight, I knew Victoria first. You've been the one pestering her." His face twisted, and he suddenly lunged up the stairs to grab me. Naturally, the bodyguard beside me quickly stopped him, resulting in chaos where he twisted his ankle and fell down the steps. Gasps arose from the crowd, and there were camera flashes in the shadows. My American company was about to go public, and no accidents could happen. As I scanned the surroundings, I saw Victoria in a black dress, rushing through the crowd, all her usual pride and elegance gone, her dark eyes filled with panic. She hurriedly dropped her bag, reached out to support Ethan's arm, her eyes overflowing with deep, inextricable emotion. She bit her lip and said, "Leave me again, and I'll never see you again." Ethan stubbornly raised his face and said, "Without having all of you, I'd rather die." After their affectionate exchange, they turned to look at me in unison. I was speechless. So this was a genuine affection born from sycophancy, right? And they were putting on a show for me right here, right? Victoria frowned and said, "Sincere, haven't I warned you not to bother Ethan? How dare you hit him? You're too much of a bully." My brow twitched fiercely. "Who did I bully?" Ethan stood up and smirked triumphantly. "Brother, you might not know, but these days the one who isn't loved is the sycophant. True love is the truth." His tone was provocatively extreme, a deep love story of a sycophant winning over the goddess. The glass window reflected my face, the neatly styled hair paired with a high-end suit, indeed resembling the typical antagonist in a novel who forcefully separates the main couple, wealthy, powerful, and cruel. But I'm not stupid, and life isn't a play. I smiled at him and said, "Truth?" Coincidentally, I happened to have a few truths on hand. The sound of guns being cocked echoed behind me as I ground my teeth. How dare anyone threaten me in America? Do these fools not realize you can legally carry guns here? Even as a sycophant, Ethan wouldn't go so far as to risk his life. He immediately retreated a couple of steps. I said, "Victoria, you claim to be a modern woman, wanting us to give each other ample freedom. I don't care, but why do you bring such misfits to the forefront and then come to me acting crazy? Don't blame me for flipping the table then." I squinted at her. The words were harsh. Victoria was being pulled away by Ethan when she paused to sneer. "Sincere, do you still think you're some heir to a great fortune? Do you still believe the family business is yours to inherit? Let me tell you, it's a new world now, one ruled by independent women. So stop dreaming in your overseas retreat. Next time we meet, you might have already lost your place at the table. The news about my mom finding a secret daughter isn't a secret anymore. It's all over the local financial papers in Newport." Escorted by her bodyguards, Victoria left. My assistant stood by my side, looking grave. "Boss S," he said, "the head office back home has halted all our collaborative projects." I squinted into the distance and said, "Prepare for my return. Victoria, do you really think that boxing-loving secret daughter can beat me? This girls help girls charade won't work against me. You've picked the wrong side." Years ago, the G and Lou families built their fortunes together. The G family delved into heavy industry, while the Lou family capitalized on market trends. Manufacturing and exporting, they carved out their empires. However, as the G family evolved from factories to a conglomerate, their reliance on the Lou family waned. But my engagement to Victoria was arranged by my grandfather's generation. Mr. Ji Zhenhua, born in the Republican era, was a legendary entrepreneur, a man whose word was law in the Ji family. Even after his passing, no one dared defy him. He was resolute his entire life and changed his mind only once when I was 8, renaming the Ji Hua Group to Ji Da Group. That day he was as stern as ever, his eagle eyes fixed on me. "Sincere," he said, enunciating every word carefully. "Remember, from now on the Da in Ji Da Group stands for sincere. You must ensure it always bears the Ji name. Our family shall never succumb to feminist antics." Upon returning home, the house felt emptier than it had 2 years ago. Father sat on the sofa, glasses perched on his nose, reading a newspaper. I poured myself some tea and casually asked, "All cleared out?" He chuckled, "Yes, the rubbish and its owner have been thrown out." I frowned. "She didn't get too much of the assets, did she?" Father looked up. "You think your father signed the prenup in vain?" He sighed. "I was skeptical back then. Now it's clear your grandfather knew best. You're more stable than I was." I smiled wryly. "Did you lay a hand on her?" Father smirked. "That shameless thing, her white knight and their secret daughter, I dealt with them all." I gave him a thumbs up. "That's my dad. The G family treats everyone equally with its iron hand. By the way, next Wednesday, the Chen family's golden wedding anniversary. Go in my place, will you?" Suddenly serious, he said, "We can't afford to lose the Chen family collaboration." I swirled my cup nonchalantly. "Of course. The Chen family is deeply rooted in Newport. The elders are kind and unassuming, well-connected, so it's no surprise I spotted Victoria there, with Ethan by her side." The man, radiant, glanced over, raised his glass and smirked at me, mouthing, "I'm the winner, loser." I felt annoyed. After all, my engagement with the Liu family wasn't formally dissolved. Victoria openly attending such an important event with her puppy was a slap in my face. People were already waiting to see my reaction. Charles, beside me, grinned smugly. "So, brother, Ethan was my guest." I patted his back. "Are you trying to kill me?" He laughed. "Brother, you've got it wrong. I'm here to vent your frustration." He curved his lips into a wicked smile. "Do you know why Ethan is so cocky now?" I replied calmly. "He thinks he's no longer just a puppy but a legitimate son-in-law of the Liu family. And the Liu family backs my mom's secret daughter, don't they? My mom has been playing her role perfectly all these years. My dad's health has been poor, so she managed the group affairs. Turns out she'd had a secret daughter before marrying my dad. She even made the public believe that the GDA group would gradually shift to female leadership, secretly installing her daughter as vice president. Victoria and the secret daughter were chatting happily, with people subtly gathering around them, eager to please. Meanwhile, no one dared to approach me. In just 2 years abroad, these people forgot the G family name. Charles at some point also wore a cold expression. He said, "Today, I'm going to show everyone who truly deserves a seat at the table." He set down his glass and walked toward the center of the party with a smile. He announced, "Today, I've invited Mr. Ethan to celebrate my grandparents' golden wedding anniversary. I heard Mr. Ethan graduated from a music academy before working. How about a song for us?" Ethan's face froze instantly. Asking a guest to sing was nothing short of public humiliation. Charles, with a stern face, asked, "What, Ethan? Mr. Ethan, are you unwilling, or do you think our family is not worthy?" The two elders of the Charles family also looked over, causing Victoria, who was about to speak, to pause. Ethan gritted his teeth and sang a segment, but since he hadn't sung in a long time, he went off-key several times. Charles stepped forward and sighed, saying, "We asked you to sing as a gesture of respect, but you sang so poorly that it spoiled the mood." Ethan's eyes turned red with anger, and he resolutely turned to leave. As he passed by me, he couldn't resist throwing out a harsh threat. "Sincere, I will never let you off. You won't be happy for long." Throughout it all, I didn't look him in the eye even once. Charles returned to my side, seeking approval, and asked, "How was it? Satisfying?" I nodded honestly. His eyes sparkled as he said, "Then the project to expand into the European market is mine." I smiled indifferently and replied, "It was yours from the start, but are you sure you can handle your sister?" He laughed and said, "Don't worry. You were abroad for 2 years, but I wasn't idle. After our grandfather passed away, my grandmother insisted that my sister, who only knows how to paint, manage the company. She didn't understand management and let her best friend parachute into the company. She acted like a puppet, listening to her friend and constantly stirring up trouble, which made many people in the company unhappy and gave me the opportunity to step in. I want to show them that the Charles family is not without capable people." The ambition on his face was undeniable. I looked at Victoria, who was toasting and chatting with Charles's sister while absent-mindedly glancing outside. I smirked, thinking, "Fiancée, your choice in people is consistently poor." Not long after the party ended, I received a video on my phone showing Victoria and Ethan kissing passionately. It was at an upscale private club with few people around, just a handful of Victoria's close friends from wealthy families. The lighting was dim and dreamy, and Ethan looked deeply affectionate. He asked sincerely, with love in his eyes, "Victoria, do you like Sincere or me?" Victoria's lips were flushed from the kiss, and she leaned into Ethan's embrace, saying earnestly, "How can a macho man like Sincere compare to you?" With that, they kissed again, oblivious to anyone else. This was a blatant warning aimed at me. Who gave these silly rich kids the gall to act like this? My gaze fell on the table in front of Victoria and saw a logo I was all too familiar with. I made a phone call and said, "Shut off the main power at the club and lock the doors." The person on the other end replied nervously, "Boss, there are still people in the club, including Miss Victoria." I laughed and said if she wasn't there, why would I cut the power? The person fell silent. I continued, "If she dares to cause trouble tomorrow, call the police and contact the legal department." I heard that night Victoria and Ethan ended up playing an all-night escape room game, bumping and bruising themselves, and only when they saw the club's logo did they finally understand, stomping their feet in anger. Victoria hated me even more and called the next day to threaten, "Sincere, just wait. The entire Sincere family will pay for your stupidity." Victoria and I did have a proper 2-month relationship. However, during our dates, she always acted superior and constantly talked about feminist ideals. She repeatedly emphasized that a good man should hand over everything to his wife after marriage, ideally merging Sincere Group with the Victoria Group to give her a sense of security. The day I proposed, she was unusually thrilled and even looked at me with more tenderness each time we met. Of course, it wasn't because she fell in love with me, but because she felt she finally represented women in defeating a man like me. Victoria and I were born in the same year, during a time when the Sincere and Victoria families were still in a honeymoon phase. Being the only son and daughter of our families, we were inevitably compared in everything, from who walked or talked first, to academic performance and skills training. I always came out on top, yet she never accepted it. She even once insisted on a physical fight with me, and before I could refuse, she unexpectedly kicked toward my vital area. She thought I was nothing seeing me grimace in pain, but the next second, I kicked back, causing her serious injury, and she was hospitalized for 3 months. Despite our rivalry, Victoria's parents had an oddly positive attitude. Whenever they saw me, they were fond of me. Until one day in the garden, with no one else around, Victoria's mother said with a smile, "Sincere, don't be like your grandfather. As a man, you should be more accommodating to girls. Victoria is your sister and your future wife. Letting her hit you a few times is nothing. Women hitting men doesn't hurt. You shouldn't hold grudges over such things. Your temper needs to change, otherwise how can we trust you with Victoria? You have a tendency towards domestic violence. We can't be at ease handing Victoria over to you. It's a pity," she sighed. "Your father is so focused on having a son that he doesn't listen to reason. If he had a daughter, he'd have a sweet little girl by his side. I'm telling you, when you and Victoria get married, you must have a daughter, not a son. Sons are unreliable." Goodness, the way she spoke made it seem like being born male was my original sin. That's when I realized Victoria was destined to become a martial arts master, and her mother's influence played no small role in that. Together they planned to manipulate me, to turn me into a submissive husband. Victoria learned from her mother, just as her father was her mother's obedient partner, allowing her mother to control the company's finances. Victoria wanted a partner just as obedient. She believed that in marriage, a husband should unconditionally comply with his wife's every whim. Thus she viewed my proposal, despite my usual disdain for her, as a concession, a sign that she had won and that I would eventually submit to her taming. Unfortunately, after our engagement, Victoria still longed for the thrill of flirting and being chased by men. At a yacht party, she engaged in unspeakable games with several wealthy heirs. With a single slap of the Sincere family's legendary equalizer hand, I made her understand the meaning of absolute power and had her thrown into the ocean. I remember it was Christmas, the water was icy, and the winter night was freezing. She ended up in the hospital for a whole week. Her parents came to make a fuss, but my father didn't even meet them. He only asked me one thing: "If you want, the engagement can be called off at any time." I chuckled, saying, "If I wanted to, I have 1,000 ways to make them cancel the engagement themselves, but not yet." The Victoria family is no longer suitable as allies, but they still have a foundation. Don't worry, Dad, this kind of woman won't step through the Sincere family's door. Since then, Victoria has completely despised me. Now the conflict has escalated again, and it seems the Victoria family is about to make a move. The public relations attack against the Sincere Group happened faster than I expected. The first shot was a video of me pushing Ethan down the stairs in New York. In less than a day, it went viral on all major social media platforms, with every related video accompanied by tales of a devoted man and a wealthy heiress, from childhood sweethearts to a dramatic love story. The so-called childhood bond was merely a blurry video of Ethan's childhood performance troupe visiting the Victoria family, paired with a tear-jerking soundtrack to make it seem genuine. Descriptions of me were less than flattering, accusing me of personal shortcomings. Soon, news of the company I hold shares in preparing for its US IPO hit the headlines. Media and financial bloggers subtly insinuated that the Sincere family might be transferring assets, painting us as untrustworthy. Our stock plummeted for 3 days. I calmly sipped my tea, scrolling through negative comments on a securities app. On one side of the table sat henpecked husbands, while on the other, wealthy wives laughed, occasionally coaxed by Ethan into giggles. This was a gathering organized by Charles's father. I typically detest such gatherings centered around how obedient husbands are, how to make them kneel on washing boards, or how to gain control of family finances. But my dad claimed his high blood pressure made him unwilling to attend, so I had to take his place. A lady, egged on by others, approached me with ill intentions. "Young Sincere, I heard your family's stock has dropped significantly. If funds are tight, don't keep it to yourself. Speak up, and we'll all help think of a solution." I set down my teacup and smiled lightly. "Mrs. Xu, you're quite the joker. Indeed, the Sincere family's stock has evaporated by billions in recent days. But this loss is nothing compared to Mr. Xu's ability to lose most of his business just by bringing you to a few banquets." Mrs. Xu's face turned awkward. Another woman chimed in, "Is the Sincere family on the decline? Are you done for? You men are too arrogant, unlike my husband. After handing the company over to me, our performance has doubled in recent months. Men who pamper their wives are fortunate indeed. You should find a wife to keep you in line." I turned to her husband and said, "I truly envy Mr. Wang's growing business, but you might not know that your brother-in-law nearly drained your company's assets recently. At this rate, you might not even afford a lawyer for a divorce." Mr. Wang immediately turned pale, stood up, and dragged his wife out. Mrs. Wu laughed, saying, "In this day and age, a man with such male chauvinism won't find a wife. Not like my daughter, who's independent and outstanding. She wouldn't even glance at someone like you." I swirled my teacup and smiled. "Your daughter is indeed exceptional. Her boyfriend is quite a catch too, and a foreign student at that. Last time I saw her at the hospital, seemingly for a prenatal checkup. Her boyfriend mentioned it was a gift for her. See you around." Mrs. Wu clutched her chest and frantically dialed her phone. Ethan sneered, "What's the point of just talking big? You've offended so many wealthy ladies here. Are you trying to bring the Sincere family down even faster? Sincere, Victoria is mine now, and the Sincere family is finished. I want to see what you can rely on to support your stupidity and arrogance now." Victoria, in a black dress, walked into the courtyard, holding Ethan's arm, ignoring my presence entirely. Was she still holding a grudge over that incident years ago when I caught her in the act and slapped her a few times? I thought indifferently, glancing at the notification on my phone. In 15 days, the Sincere Group would hold an emergency shareholders meeting. The news of the upcoming meeting had long been on the front page of the local financial daily. During that period, Tiffany, the secret daughter, emerged as the savior and leading lady of the Sincere family, constantly gaining popularity for herself. I, on the other hand, was entangled in various negative news and was gradually marginalized in the Sincere Group. Victoria didn't hesitate to kick me while I was down. She announced to the media that she was breaking off her engagement with the Sincere family and would soon be engaged to Ethan. All of a sudden, I was scorned by everyone. The media reported that I was crying every day. Crying every day? What kind of phrasing is that? Would I cry every day? I looked at the mountain of project proposals, contracts, and official correspondences piled on my desk, and at Charles, who was enthusiastically sketching out market plans in front of the whiteboard. I couldn't help but reflect that the biggest taboo for a businessman is losing oneself in the noise and praise. The shareholders' meeting was held as scheduled. I put on a custom suit and entered the conference room with a neatly combed hairstyle. The previously amiable atmosphere turned cold in an instant. I walked to the head of the table and naturally took a seat. Tiffany sneered and said, "Sincere, do you think you still deserve to sit in that position?" I looked straight at her and said, "I hold 20% of the group's shares, making me the largest shareholder next to my father. If I'm not qualified, are you? What do you have? That your mother Chloe got through technical shares?" I turned and looked at each shareholder present. Quentin is unwell and cannot attend this meeting. Therefore, I will preside over the shareholders' meeting. The purpose of this meeting is to reorganize the board of directors, which is my proposal. My proposal is to remove Chloe from all positions in the company. I have drafted a new board member list. As soon as I finished speaking, the room was silent enough to hear a pin drop. Tiffany shouted in anger, "Sincere, who do you think you are? Do you know how much loss and crisis you have brought to Sincere Group?" I chuckled. "Oh, you do know the Sincere Group is the Sincere family's business. You don't need to worry about our affairs. You might as well focus on the subsidiary you manage. Sincere Shoe Group is under investigation for improper dealings with government officials thanks to you and Chloe. The official documents should have reached the company by now. I asked a lawyer on your behalf, 3 years, minimum. You're welcome." Tiffany's eyes widened as she replied, "You're insane. Aren't you afraid the issue with Sincere Shoe Group will affect the entire Sincere Group?" I laughed. "It's merely a subsidiary. Its internal structure has long since changed. It's better to cut it off in time. I'm not bothered with her." I said, "If anyone else has any questions, I'll directly assume they have collusion with Sincere Shoe. Going forward, the focus of Sincere's work will continue to be on expanding overseas, pursuing global market development. My father, Quentin, has entrusted me with full responsibility for projects in the US and Europe. I hope to have your unwavering support. These 2 projects have nearly 30% of Sincere's funds invested in them. As shareholders of Sincere, you should know that our fortunes are tied together." The meeting ended smoothly, with nearly all shareholders siding with me. These opportunists wouldn't truly risk everything to side with Tiffany and Chloe, who hold no real power. I smirked, satisfied, and as I left I dropped one last remark. "You all are getting on in years. It's best not to stir things up too much." Everyone thought my return would spark a fierce power struggle. How laughable, power struggle. Sincere has no need for a power struggle, for power was determined at my birth. After the meeting, I immediately held a media conference. Besides emphasizing the Sincere family's absolute control over Sincere Group, I revisited the charitable deeds of Mr. Quentin from years ago and explained that Sincere Group's current business strategy is entirely normal. Sincere is dedicated to promoting its local brand internationally and announced plans to increase contributions to education and healthcare, taking on more social responsibility as a corporation should. Overnight, my reputation began to recover. Before I even deployed any online campaign, netizens began to speak up for me, vehemently criticizing that pair of scoundrels. They mocked how Ethan dared to maintain a devoted lover image when he was such a scoundrel. Fortunately, some Chinese were present during the New York fiasco and recorded a video. Public opinion began to shift. Netizens commented, "No way, the puppy is shamelessly acting up right in front of the main person. Absolutely shameless. While someone is busy making money, he's busy being a puppy. And the girl, don't go into hiding. Victoria, right? Pretending to be some innocent rich girl. All these rich and beautiful elite narratives are just hype." I read the comments with relish, only to be notified the next second that the post had been deleted. The Liu family's reaction was swift, but the internet has a short memory. Without public appearances, Victoria's voice would soon fade, but Ethan was in a tough spot. His career in internet marketing and product endorsement could be ruined by a single video, forever nailing him to the pillar of shame. My fingers tapped lazily on the desktop. The head of the PR department was sitting on the sofa beside me, waiting for instructions. I said, "Push all the posts related to Victoria and Ethan online," pausing, then continuing, with a focus on Victoria's. Although the relationship between the Sincere family and the Victoria family isn't as close as it once was, they are still bound by significant projects. There are numerous matters to negotiate in the future. Having just returned to the country as a junior member, it was only right for me to visit personally. After ringing the doorbell of the Victoria family's villa, to my surprise, it was Ethan who opened the door. Recently, he's been mired in public controversy, with many anti-puppy men labeling him as a disgrace to males, wanting to catch and beat him up. Yet, he had disappeared without a trace. Turns out he was hiding at the Victoria family's home. Now he no longer had his former arrogance. He looked disheveled, with a scruffy beard and simple attire, his face filled with exhaustion. When the man across from me looked up, he showed hatred. He gritted his teeth and said, "How dare you come to the Victoria family's door, Sincere? Let me tell you, Victoria broke off the engagement with you long ago. Don't think that just because you won over Tiffany, you can win Victoria's heart." I was speechless. Why would I want to win over Victoria's heart? I couldn't understand the mindset of a puppy. Perhaps when a person can only hold on to a tiny bit, they believe everyone else is coveting it. Only he treated Victoria like a treasure. Suddenly, with unwarranted confidence, he raised his head arrogantly, striking a lordly pose, and sneered, "You better get lost quickly, don't dirty my family's villa." I was speechless. Who did he think he was? I ignored him and walked right in. Mrs. Victoria was sitting sternly on the sofa, looking displeased, clearly waiting for me. Victoria was hugging a pillow, sitting on a nearby single sofa with an unhappy expression. Ethan was trying to please Mrs. Victoria, saying, "Auntie, look, he's dirtying the floor." I curled my lips into a smile and said, "If the floor is dirty, why don't you get down and clean it up?" Ethan was furious. He gritted his teeth. "Sincere, what do you mean?" I chuckled coldly and said, "Isn't it true? Men who love doing housework are a bonus. Do I need to teach you these tips on pampering your wife?" Ethan was even angrier, but he didn't dare act out, so he could only look to Mrs. Victoria for help. Mrs. Victoria already looked down on Ethan and now felt even more embarrassed, so she ignored him. Mrs. Victoria said, "Sincere, I know you're here to discuss business today. Let's put business aside for now and talk about your engagement with Victoria." Ethan's face turned completely pale, and Victoria pouted, rolling her eyes at me. Mrs. Victoria continued, "At that time, Victoria was immature. She was a bit willful, but you're the man, you should be more forgiving. Moreover, the engagement was arranged by the previous generation. How can it be called off just like that?" I replied coldly, "Are you saying that I should overlook your daughter being involved with another man, and even allow her to live with him while having a fiancé?" Mrs. Victoria sipped her tea and said earnestly, "Sincere, you're still young. We know you were behind the news about Victoria last time, but we're not holding it against you. But let's be honest, men have had multiple wives for generations, oppressing women. Is it so unforgivable for a woman to cheat once or twice?" I mocked. "Mrs. Victoria, you seem quite experienced. Is this how you justify your actions every time you fool around outside? Does my uncle know about this?" Everyone's expression changed. Victoria bit her lip and said, "Sincere, how can you talk to my mother like that? Let me tell you, if the Sincere family wants to continue collaborating with the Victoria family, you must concede an additional 5%, or there's no need to talk." I replied, "Great." I stood up with a relaxed smile and said, "Since you've brought it up, I don't need to worry about the elders' feelings. I came here today to inform you that all future collaboration projects between the Sincere family and the Victoria family are off the table. I've already vetoed all related proposals." Mrs. Victoria stood up, pointing at me and yelling, "Are you trying to ruin the Sincere family?" I laughed and said, "No." I shook my finger at her and continued, "It's you who are ruining the Victoria family. I don't need unfaithful allies. Since you chose the wrong side, the Victoria family should step down. The listing process in the US will proceed as planned. During this time, I've been so busy flying back and forth between the two countries. The Victoria family's retaliation came as expected. Not only did they cancel existing orders and partnerships, but they also allied with other companies to besiege our products. Charles's comment over the phone was, "Thank the foolish competitors for sending us a business package." He represented the Charles family to take over the remaining product lines, even if only partially, which required significant financial turnover and sales capabilities. Only then did everyone realize that the Charles family's ambitions might be much greater than they appeared. The Victoria family was too arrogant. While there will always be a leader in an industry, the leader won't always be the same. The Victoria family not only failed to see the Sincere family fall into a financial crisis, but lost a significant portion of their market share due to the lack of support from the Sincere family. Many major clients, sensing the shift, began terminating their partnerships with the Victoria family. Charles was happily picking up the pieces. While I was busy advancing projects, I relentlessly suppressed the Victoria family. Victoria didn't stop. I ignored all her calls until she showed up at my door. "Sincere, have you gone mad? What on earth are you trying to do?" she demanded, her hysteria making her face look contorted, a far cry from the defiant woman I last saw. "What am I trying to do?" "Revenge, obviously," I replied. She gave a cold snort, then sat down on the sofa. "Do you know why I despise you so much? So much that I'd rather marry Ethan, that puppy, than be with you," she sneered. Calmly, I took a seat and said, "Because you're brainless and think you can manipulate men." She paused, then angrily retorted, "That's because you're vengeful and macho. Look at Ethan. He knows how to treat women right, how to make them happy, how to pursue them without expecting immediate returns. He knows that girlfriends are the priority, but you're petty and calculative. Who would want a guy like you?" I chuckled and said, "Vengeful and macho? Are you referring to when you kicked me as a kid and I kicked you back, breaking your bone? Or are you talking about when you cheated after your engagement and I slapped you away? You can't win. So you say men shouldn't bully women. If you could win, you'd say women are stronger than men. I'm not buying it. Know your place. If you can't win, just admit defeat instead of deluding yourself into thinking you can manipulate others into accepting your stance. All that manipulation does is make me want to slap you a couple of times to snap you out of it." Her face turned red with anger as she raised her hand to slap me. I laughed and said, "Victoria, if you hit me here, I'll make sure you end up in jail." When Victoria left, her face was even worse than when she arrived. Unable to win in business or arguments, such an opponent is truly boring. The Liu family was in a panic. Her parents even threw a banquet, hoping to find a marriage alliance for Victoria to secure a reliable ally. But which wealthy young man in New York hadn't heard of Victoria's notorious reputation as a brawler? Thanks to me, her sordid affair with Ethan was explosively covered by the media for a whole week, thoroughly entertaining the public. Now when people see her face, they likely recall the scandalous headlines. Victoria's reputation was completely ruined. Yet the Liu family remained proud and refused to lower their standards. But any force capable of helping them wouldn't want Victoria. Reportedly, no one showed up at the banquet, leaving her mother fuming in a futile rage, smashing things at home. After finishing my final roadshow in the US, I ran into Tiffany on the flight back. I heard that Chloe took all the blame to protect her, receiving a heavy sentence. Tiffany didn't let her mother down, quietly recuperating in the shadows and rarely showing up, though she's been getting close to the Liu family lately. As she disembarked, she deliberately walked beside me, coldly saying, "Sincere, don't think you've won. As long as I hold that 10% share, I'll ensure your company never rests, and you men will never understand the importance of mastering technology." I stopped and watched her back, my anger deepening. Tiffany moved faster than I expected. With the Liu family's financial backing, she partnered with another manufacturing company to develop a new type of robot, similar in function to our latest product but cheaper. Then, using the Liu family's exports, she deliberately competed with us in the market. Overreaching. Did they think I spent 2 years in the US for nothing? I called our legal department in the US, instructing them to swiftly sue Tiffany's company for patent infringement. Then I arranged a meeting with Charles. The man across from me was eager, and I firmly stated, "I want the Liu family to have no chance of recovery this time." He replied, "Don't worry. I've been watching them for years, waiting to bring them down. They've been too comfortable in their position for too long. It's time to make room for others." I nodded and added, The power struggles within the Chen family. The sincere group will always stand behind you. Here's to a fruitful partnership. The most shocking news often breaks out quietly. The chairman of the Liu Group was taken in for investigation for defrauding state export tax rebates. Due to the enormous sum involved, part of the company's funds were frozen, leaving everyone at Liu Group in a panic. Not long ago, Liu Group had undergone massive layoffs due to shrinking business, unable to afford severance pay, leading to multiple arbitration cases filed by former employees. Now, with the chairman arrested, morale plummeted, and employees surrounded Victoria at the office, demanding assurances. In the reporter's footage, I watched as the once proud Victoria was cornered and pushed around by employees. Her expensive dress was crumpled and disheveled, as she feigned a pitiful plea for mercy. But why would I let her off so easily? I generously fed the media another bombshell. The Liu Group's chairman had transferred over $150 million abroad in the past 3 years. Now, not only was Victoria. After being pushed around a few times, several young and impulsive employees had already slapped her. In the footage, insults and the sound of sirens mixed together, with people shouting, "Taking our hard-earned money abroad just to keep boxing overseas and live your luxurious life, huh? You beast, hit her." Not long ago, she was cursing in my office, the vengeful rich heiress, now turned into a fallen woman scorned by everyone overnight. With trouble at the Liu family, Tiffany couldn't stay unscathed either. For the Xu family's ramp and production to keep pace with the Ji family, it needed a massive influx of funds. If the funding stopped now, everything they had done would be in vain. At this moment, the only valuable thing in Tiffany's hands was the shares of the Ji family. I set a trap and quickly acquired her shares at a rock-bottom price. What awaited her next were dual accusations of intellectual property infringement filed by Jida Group in both our domestic and U.S. courts. Ethan wasn't too dumb. Seeing the Liu family on the verge of collapse, he immediately learned from my past tactics and held a media conference. At the conference, he looked extremely sorrowful, unshaven, and pitiful. He cried in front of the camera, confessing, "I was too stupid. I was also manipulated by Victoria and willingly gave everything for her. Later, I found out she already had a fiancé, and I was just a tool for her to get back at him. That's when I realized she always treated me like a puppy. I want to tell everyone, being a puppy leads to nothing in the end. I confess I really know I was wrong, and I only ask for Mr. Sincere's forgiveness. Being a puppy really gets you nowhere. I'm sorry." True to his marketing skills, his performance was something. Watching the live stream, I saw the comments flooded with sympathy. "Poor puppy, don't blame him." I pressed my temples, feeling them throb. "Too bad, didn't Victoria tell you? I'm known for my vengeful nature." I bought all of Ethan's dark secrets from paparazzi at a high price and let the public feast on them for free. This wasn't my first time doing it. I'm quite adept at using live streams and fake comments, selling fakes, evading taxes, and dramatizing for sales. I released one piece of dirt a day, just for the fun of it. Ethan soon faced strong resistance and was blacklisted across the industry, eventually issuing a statement of withdrawal from online platforms, losing his career. The investigation and evidence collection against the Liu family was a long process. But with the chairman imprisoned and the heiress becoming a public target, everyone knew the Liu family was done for. On my 28th birthday, I officially became the largest shareholder of Jida Group, its youngest chairman. On the day Charles led his company to the free trade zone in Southport City, I was invited to the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Many entrepreneurs from Southport were present, each with a friendly smile, waiting to toast and talk with me. I'm not fond of spirits, so I raised a teacup instead, toasting with tea. Some followed suit, switching to tea as well, saying, "We've heard Boss S loves tea." Tasting it today is indeed a unique experience. The gentle fragrance of tea is more intoxicating than strong liquor. Charles finally pulled me away from the overwhelming compliments, saying, "These old folks act like they've never had tea before." I looked at the floating tea leaves in my cup. When the Liu family was in its prime, Many ladies surrounded Victoria, calling her an independent and awakened leading woman. Now that the glory is mine, they say I'm the brightest gem of Southport. I calmly said, as long as you stand above them, even water can be more fragrant than wine. Charles was silent for a moment, then asked, "What do you plan to do with the Lou family and Tiffany?" I gazed at the distant sea, smiled, and said, "They're out of the game already, Charles. Our sights should be set on a further journey." Extra Ethan, after a long silence, hit the headlines again. The title read, "Former Puppy and Fallen Goddess Clash." This time it wasn't my doing, but promoting it was easy. In the video, the two were fighting as if it was a life or death struggle. The paparazzi explained in the caption that Ethan went to Victoria to demand repayment for the gifts he had lavished on her. Victoria called him crazy, saying she must have been cursed to meet such a jerk. It was dog eat dog, with both hurling insults at each other, revealing each other's secrets, and showing nothing but hatred. I couldn't help but recall Ethan's words in New York, "True love is the ultimate truth." How laughable. Someone knocked on the door, and I turned off my phone screen. "Come in," I said. My secretary Angel entered, wearing a black pencil skirt. She said, "Boss S, the product launch is about to start. All attendees are present." I glanced at my watch and replied, "Let's go."